There we go. Diet Dr. Shasta, the best diet soda you ever could possibly drink. Oh, that's good stuff. Anyway, track some down. Trust me, it's really good. Anyway, so here I am. I'm going to talk to you about, well, and the tales from behind the DM screen. I'm going to talk to you today about verisimilitude, which I believe if I looked it up on dictionary.com, it would say something like the appearance or the look of being real. So what that is, besides being a word you could score a ton of points on if you could get it in Scrabble, is it is something where in the parlance of an RPG, it is the act of trying to make your role-playing game world real. So, a couple quick stories, just, well, they won't be quick. Well, one of them is. So, I remember one time I was reading something and about combat and how D&D combat worked and what it was and like why and what exactly were hit points, right? So, I mean, and let's break things down into bare mechanisms. Hit points are what allow players to live longer and go after bigger things than the goblins and the orcs and the kobolds they fought at first. Hit points allow a fighter to stand up to a giant red dragon, get breathed on, and manage to survive. It was an article, I believe, in Dragon or something like that. But what it pretended, or what it was trying to get at, was that hit points were the not so much the health of the player, but it was their ability to shrug off what would have been mortal blows, and make sure that they just became like nicks and cuts, if you will. They were attacks that made them slower or more weary, and until eventually a death blow could be struck. And I always thought that was just dumb. I mean, it's just kind of what. So what makes it so after if a fighter's got 80 hit points and I just sit there and hack at him with an axe for 10 rounds, hitting him for 8 points of damage a round or whatever. What is it? It's the 8th or 9th hack that eventually finally breaks through. I mean, he should be able to parry my axe just as well in the first round as he would in the 8th or the 9th round. I mean, it doesn't matter, right? Hit points are a function that just allow the story of the world to progress and become something different than what you first experienced. And that's, once again, going to the hero's journey type of situation where theoretically your band of adventurers are the Fellowship of the Ring or whatever, they are the Dragonlance heroes. They are trying to go from point A to point B, tell the story, and progress as it is. If they just kept on fighting the same orc over and over again, that wouldn't be a very interesting. You have to have something. You have to have escalating challenges, and the players would be bored. The dungeon master would be bored. Everybody would be bored, and you'd want to move forward. Now there'd probably be, if I was a better game designer or something, maybe I could think of a way to you could show that progression without using something like hit points. And I'm getting stuck on this hit points thing, and I really didn't want to, but it just means that it can be one of those things that will break the verisimilitude. Why is a 9th level fighter more healthy than a 1st level fighter? They haven't changed. If anything, they've gotten older and maybe become more frail, things like that. I mean, there's no real rhyme or reason to it. It just is. And I remember one time we were arguing about this, because that's what D&D usually turns into, is arguments between people about rules and what have you, which is something I actually want to do as a video as well. Maybe I'll try to do that one later this week. But I remember somebody once said, they said, well, I mean, this is the idea of combat is silly. It's if you and I went out in the street and I hit you with a sword, you'd die. and that would be done. And like we had to go, and a few of us were like nodding, yeah, well, but that's real life. This is a game. And like, so that kind of like, oh, okay, you know, and that of course started an argument. It's like, well, yes, but I mean, there's certain aspects of this that we want to have real, and a lot of times, like, there's a lot of people that are going to be playing, games of like, you know, gritty realism or whatever. And I'm a big fan of that, and I'm a big fan of the gritty realism. What I like about it is I like NPCs to be more than one note. I'm Bob the shopkeep. You know, I'm Hank the armor smith. You know, I want them to be more than one note bits. I want there to be a little bit of intrigue, like people having backstories and stuff like that. But once again, not a giant backstory. Why write, you know, 5 pages of backstory for, you know, the city guard when your players aren't ever going to learn that guy's name anyway? You know, so there's things like that. But I do, you know, I enjoy like having a more grounded fantasy world because I like having magic being more fantastic and, you know, and feared, you know, for that matter. If you had wizards that like could walk into a village and just start throwing fireballs left and right, and they could basically murder everybody in the town, yeah, magic should be feared. You know, that guy in the pointed hat, he could kill you with a look. That is something that is exceedingly scary and difficult to deal with. I mean, you know, I'm going to draw a parallel to real life if that, because that's just way too real and way too scary. But you can draw a parallel to that world and why, like, certain. I mean, if you are in like a high magic world, like Forgotten Realms, for example, where, you know, like the Red Wizards of Thay walk down the street, they have all their, you know, tattoos all over their face, and they just wear the red robes, and everybody just knows that they're super magical people. You know, like if you have warlocks, and you have sorcerers, and you have wizards, and you have all these different people that can use arcane magic. And they're just accepted, right? And so yes, there may be like in a high magic world, maybe they wouldn't be so scary, right? Because, you know, if a guy walked into your tavern and wanted to start throwing fireballs around, well, you know, your dragon-born sorcerer bartender, you know, could battle him and be able to defeat him. So there really wouldn't be an issue there, right? There wouldn't be anything for you to be scared of. But so I do prefer like a gritty world, but I'm kind of bearing the lead here. So how much verisimilitude, how much real should be in your campaign? And I mean, ultimately that's going to be your decision, right? You're going to like want to know like how, you know, how much of like real world, like say politics or real world mentalities, real world. Like I remember somebody once said, it's like for the amount of times that my character has gotten knocked out in this one combat only to be brought back to life like 2-3 times, you know, wouldn't I have PTSD at some point? I was like, yeah, probably, but you know, it's like I don't want to have that as part of my gaming world, right? You know, it's just like the real world is scary and uncertain, and there's lots of stuff in it that I don't like at all. And I use D&D as a way to escape that for a few hours with my friends, and I don't want to try to like bring in outside real stuff to a certain point into my game. I want to keep that stuff out. Now, that being said, there is some parts of like making your world real that are important, and I think that like understanding how the medieval world works and how like what was like an actual like day-to-day life in a medieval world. There's a few books out there called Orbis Mundi that are about like playing like D&D or playing fantasy role-playing in a real world setting. And like a real medieval world. I mean, obviously, like you can use some of the stuff or use the stuff that's in those books to what you like, but it does give you a really good firm grasp as to what day-to-day life would be like, and what your player characters would be encountering. I mean, what would the local tax collector be like, and what would they tax? What would like punishments for crimes be for certain things? What would be expected of adventurers by the local lord if they called upon them for aid? There's like a wide swath of those things that can be answered, and I think including those, and I'll put a link to those books actually in the description here. I backed them on Kickstarter and I got them. They're really good. And I think that there's something to be said about adding that type of aspect into the game, and just to kind of keep everybody grounded and to keep everybody like kind of on their toes. One of the like more famous OSR rules compilations, Lamentations of the Flame Princess, which I don't so much like the system, but I do like the adventures and the like campaign scenarios and stuff that they've created for that system. I think they're just fantastic. I mean, they're crazy, right? And I've done some reviews of that stuff on this channel before. You can track some down, but like they are like very much like the mentality of that is that monsters are real but exceedingly rare, and the whole world takes place in real life historical world, right? So if it's like the 1600s in Spain, it's the 1600s in Spain, but with fantastic elements added in. And monsters, like I said, are real, but they are exceedingly rare and are exceedingly scary and strange, and if your players run into them, they should run. Now, that, in my opinion, is too much. I mean, I like the idea of playing in like true Dark Ages. I think that's a really cool take on things, and I think that at some point maybe I'd run a campaign in that kind of world. But I also think that if you remove all of the like monstrousness of a fantasy world, I think it gets a little boring. Oh, another group of bandits, another mercenary company that we have to defeat. I do think that having like actual monsters for your PCs to fight, because here's the deal, it is tough for players to want to like, I shouldn't say tough, but there is definite, like, one of my players recently, just in a game, said they had a situation where they had run into this cult of cannibals, right? Horrible humans, right? They were killing people. They had filed their teeth into points. They were killing and murdering people, but they worshipped arcane magic. Like they thought that those that could cast spells were like sons of demons, and they worshipped a demon lord and all these things. So in the combat, the combat had progressed like 2 or 3 rounds, and the wizard, who is down to his last few spells, finally cast a spell because things are getting a little bit dicey, and he cast a spell. Well, immediately, like the last 3 people they were fighting, they immediately like fell to their knees and surrendered and said, and just like, it's like, oh, we apologize. It's like, we are so sorry. Son of a demon. And they were just extremely apologetic, and they like, they were begging for their lives at that point. So the players who were cutting these cannibals down left and right, all of a sudden now were focused. Had this moment where it's like, I don't feel right in killing these people anymore. It's like, I mean, there's one thing about, you could take them back to like the real world and like bring them in and then have them put to trial and most likely put to death for their crimes, but they didn't have like the moral like fortitude to just say, okay, grab them, slit their throats, and be done with it, because they were human. Admittedly not very human, but and they had surrendered. They had given themselves up willingly, and so they just did not have. Now, perfect example, another campaign that I ran prior to that, another player, they were running around in like a troglodyte cavern, and they were going left and right, and they found the hatchery for that troglodyte cavern, and inside were the troglodyte young and the troglodyte women, non-combatants, and the good cleric of, I forget, like Retribution or something like that. That was one of the things. He says, I get a glassy-eyed stare, and I march in there and I start cutting them down. And I was like, but I guarantee you that if that had been human women and human children, there's no way on earth that he would have done that, because they were monsters, right? And so you remove the human element from that. So what I think is that sometimes your players just need to be able to just start taking axes to monsters. They need to be gutting orcs. They need to, kill the owlbear that's marauding in the fields. They need to track down the ankheg that's killing cows, right? Because that's just, it's an easy moral dilemma. There is no moral dilemma. They're a monster. We're civilized. They need to die because they're going to kill us. And so I don't think that when you play a game with has like kind of removes all the monsters and you just like pile on these moral dilemmas onto players, that one or two, fine, right? Make them make a choice. Make them make a tough choice. Make them like try to figure something out. But make sure you just give them the chance to just be the inner murder hobo that they really want to be. Now, what does this have to do with verisimilitude? So, the thing is that I think that every game master, dungeon master, whatever you want to call them, you need to, before the game starts, decide what level of that realness you want to have in your campaign. And you can shake it up. I mean, I think there's something to be said for like even like the old like what was the Barrier Peaks adventure, where the PCs stumble upon the flying saucer, like they crash landed or whatever. It's like a totally completely jarring moment where, like, yes, sure, we're fighting beholders and vampires and trolls and ettins and things like that, but all of a sudden robots that like will completely and totally like change. So that's also like a introduction of what the preceding thing was, the real, right? That's your real, but all of a sudden now this is something outlandish and something that was unexpected. So there is something to be said as far as that. You can change things, you can move the notch, but you do want to be able to return your players back to like their comfort zone as well. But regardless, I think what every Dungeon Master needs to do is you need to decide how fantastic your world is going to be. Can people teleport at will? Can people fly? Which are two big things. Transportation magic is something you need to determine right away. Are there flying boats that people can get on and take them from place to place? Do wizards just set up shop regularly? And have towers in cities? And you see them walking down the street heading to the market. That kind of thing. There's all kinds of things like that I think that as when you start your campaign world, you need to think about, and you need to determine what that level of real or verisimilitude you're going to incorporate. Now, the biggest thing is that once you determine that level, you need to stick to that level and not alter it. I mean, yeah, like I said, you can click up you can crank it up a little bit, but you got to return it back down. The biggest thing is that sometimes you just have to be able to say, this is happening in this world because I said so, and not because you have to have some big background as to why this world affects this or why this world did this or that or the other thing. Sometimes you just got to say, that's just the way the world is, and that's how it goes. And your players need to respect that as you as the DM. The biggest thing is that if you are going to really, really pay attention to like the ecology of the world and make sure that's a thing. I've heard people talking about, like, I want to make sure, like, the plate tectonics of my world are real, and like how that adjusts things. And it was like, if you want to go that level, great, fine, go for it. I mean, and that's what you get enjoyment out of. Super. But remember, all the detail in the world doesn't really matter if your players don't care enough to actually, find out about it, react to it, interact with it. So you may find yourself sitting on a situation where it's like, wow, I went to all this work and the players, like, didn't even bother at all with any of the stuff that I've put into this world and I've created. And maybe that won't matter to you, and maybe you'll just be very, very proud of the situations that you created and the backgrounds you created, and that's fine, awesome. But by and large, I think you're going to have a little bit of letdown there. So make sure the players know. Make sure the players know just the deep level of of your creation that you've gone through, and so that they can respect that, and they can ask you questions, and they can dive into the lore of the world that you're creating. The biggest thing here is that, I mean, the last takeaway I have is, I used to write like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-page essays about the world. Like, it's like, and this country, and it's ruled by this person, and their son is this, and then their wife is this. He's got 3 grandchildren. They were in a war with this country here. 5 years ago, there was a grain blight, and you go through this big long process. And the thing is that for me, I had a lot of fun writing that stuff. But I'm sure my players read it once and threw it away and never looked at it again. And the thing is like, I would even reference things. Oh, well, they're like that because of the grain blight. And they'd be like, okay. And they just move on with themselves. And so if you're going to create a big, giant real world, and you're going to try to make it a point to make the world as real as possible, awesome. Go for it. You do you. But do it for yourself and for your world that you've created, and whatever interest your players have in it, and draw from it, and enjoy out of it. Just consider that like the cherry on top of the sundae, because they're never going to be as excited or as interested into the work you've gone into to make your world as real as you possibly can, more than you. So there you go. That is my little story about verisimilitude. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions at all about any of those things, go ahead and ask. If you have any stories you want to tell me about, like massive amounts of campaign background you've gone through and it didn't really amount to anything, love to hear those as well. Not that I want to share in your misery or anything like that, but I love to hear stories about campaign prep and things like that, and I love to hear about campaign worlds as well. And as always, if you have an idea for an episode of this, please let me know, and I can dive into that if you like. Just be the best version of you that you can possibly be, and I'll talk to you soon. All right, bye-bye.